Call the meeting of Hudson Valley HVREMSCO to order. If we could start with a pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You all just stand for a minute, a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Israel's unable to be with us tonight, so Karen's going to be kind enough to call up roll call, please.
Okay, Dutchess County, Chrissy Amy. Present. David Violante. Joan Siebert.
Present.
Anthony Singh.
Here.
David Jensen.
Present.
Steve Scully Beeman.
Present.
William Marshall. Orange County, Michael Bigg. Rich Haley. Wayne Chan. David Grass.
Here.
Israel Knobloch, he's not here. Frank Cassanite. Michael Wachowski. Nancy Pfeiffer. Putnam County, Robert Cuomo.
Here.
David Jacobson.
Here.
Steve Wygan.
Here.
Faith Martin. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Nicholas Falcone. Sarah Baker. Rockland County, Bernice Gerardi.
Here.
Nick Rizecki. Tim Egan.
Here.
Desiree Leone. Glenn Albin. Terry Hamilton.
Present.
Ephraim Tauber. B.J. Leidner. Sullivan County, Albie Bachman. Alex Rao.
Here.
Neil Madow. Norman Prentice. Mark Strauss. Sean Lewis. Ulster County, Rich Parrish. Kelly Nelson.
Here.
Karen Pardini.
Here.
Matt Goodnow. 15.
All right, just let the record show Wayne Chance here.
Okay, 16.
16. Very good. We have some distinguished guests here tonight, so what I'd like to do is just take an opportunity for you guys to introduce yourselves and where you're from. Don't have a deer in the headlight look. We're not going to, put you on a committee. Yet. But you took the time to come out and be with us tonight, and we'd like to recognize that you're here. So, in no particular order, feel free.
Carol Hilton from Tivoli Rescue Squad.
John Mahoney, Dutchess County EMS Coordinator. Distinguished.
Eric Wheeler, Rhinebeck Fire Fund.
Jeff Cotter, Rhinebeck Fire.
Outstanding. Thank you guys very much for coming out. The only thing that we do ask is just make sure you sign in on the guest list if you didn't get an opportunity to before. We'd just like to acknowledge. We'll let you in on a little joke that was going on. We got started a few minutes late because our executive director lost his mouse, and we were literally searching the building for a mouse. And then we discovered it on top of the Yeti container, blending in very well with the Yeti container.
I thought that's what I had to do.
It was a little inside joke. I didn't want you to think that we were laughing during roll call, but it was a little bit of fun. Hopefully everybody got a chance to review the minutes that Karen sent out. Like a motion to accept the minutes from the December 21 meeting?
His motion.
No, we didn't have any minutes sent out.
That's right, we didn't.
Israel never sent me the minutes.
I apologize, Joan. You're not going to be able to
No problem.
look at those minutes? Okay. So, I apologize for that. Next
So I'll
month we will
second
have
that they never came.
we'll have 2 months meetings. Okay, I apologize for that. Mr. Parrish could not be here tonight. He had the audacity to take his wife on a personal trip, and they are currently enjoying themselves somewhere west of here. So it's not warm, but they are having fun. So he had no report, but thank you, everybody. As far as my report, it's going to be short and brief. Hopefully, everybody on the council got the email that I sent out last week, which was essentially a copy of the sustainability tags report that came out to HVREMSCO. And what I was hoping to do is give everybody an opportunity to read it, go through it, and then tonight we would open up, when we get into new business, kind of a discussion on how we as, a council and 6 counties can work together to support those 25 initiatives. So that was really the bulk of what I have on my report. Otherwise, everything else is going to be in bills. So I'll pass that on. Mr. Treasurer, do you have a report, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Wayne.
Okay, there were 20 checks for $12,703.87. As usual, the big hitters were rent and health insurance, and some miscellaneous payments for phones, internet. We transferred on January 5th, 30,000 to payroll, and then again on December 20th, we transferred 10,000 to payroll. Financials, there's been 2 deposits for a total of $83,926.31. Our New York State pending vouchers are on 9/30/22 for $63,971.72 was submitted to Beams. Again, on 12/31/22, $55,937.49 has been submitted to Beams. We also have 12,000 on 12/31/22, $4,606.09 has been submitted to Beams. And then on 9/30/22, $4,643.81 has been submitted, for a total of $128,969.11. Some of the problem was we put in for the vouchers and the contracts had to be re-executed with the original vouchers, so we had to resubmit them again. Okay, so for a total, on our 3 accounts, we have $138,802.04.
Thank you very much. Can we have a motion to accept the treasurer's report? Tim and Teresa, thank you very much. Any questions on the report? All those in favor? Against? Abstentions? Hearing none. Thank you very much. All right. Bill, can you get the regional staff report, please?
Okay, February 6th, 7th, and 8th, we were up in Albany or actually Troy, for the state meeting, so there's a bunch of stuff that we're gonna be discussing on that. I'm not sure how we're gonna do that, but we will get that covered. For financials, Wayne took care of that. We're in decent standing, so hopefully we'll get paid shortly from the vouchers that we submitted, and then we'll be good back to where we should be. All our contracts are in place, so there's no problems with that anymore. As of 12/2, everything went into place. As of today, a new set of BLS and collaborative protocols went into effect. So take a look at them, see. There's also 2 policies out there. It's Policy 4 and Policy 5. Policy 4 is a change log for the collaborative protocol, and that's 2304. And 2303 is for the BLS protocols, so it lists everything that's changed, so it should make things a little easier this time than it has done in the past. The Muru application can also update itself today, so that should be up to date for everybody.
Yeah, but you have to log out and then log back in. That's the only way it updates. Doesn't automatically do it.
In the last week or so, the Bureau of EMS put out 7 new policies. One was the policy 2307 was scope of practice by level of EMS provider. 2306 was oxygen tank compliance. And it tells you how to read them and what the information is on your oxygen tank. 2305 was the removal of endotracheal intubation for the AEMT level, which we're aware of, and it's been taken out of the curriculum, and now it's been taken out of our, it's going to be taken out of our equipment requirements. 2304 was the collaborative protocol change log. 2303 was the BLS protocol change log. 2302 was instructor training requirements. They put one out last year, 2202. This updates that. One of the major things is now when you're doing your CIC training, your, what do they call it, the class that you have to teach, one has to be videoed. So that has to be kept on, and it has to be reviewed by both the student and who's ever proctoring them. And then policy 2307 is the BLS iGel project, which is our pilot project that we're running for the entire state. And we still, just so you know, we still can't access HCS to give everybody the authority that they need at the agency level so that the providers can print their cards. Hopefully that will come soon, but they haven't been able to do it yet. In the operating certificate part, New Windsor finally got their expansion of territory from 2018. Everything has been updated, and the certificate now includes the town of Cornwall. Lake Carmel EMS has been issued a new certificate. It was a transfer of ownership from Lake Carmel Fire Department. And on my desk now, I have a town of Montgomery is looking for an ALS upgrade, and that's going to be considered at the next REMAC on March 6th. We've had our audit done, completed. Everything's been submitted, so we're in pretty good shape with that. I have that the HVREMSCO EMS and Crisis Tag submitted their report to HVREMSCO on 2/8/23, and 25 key recommendations, which we're going to look at this evening. Outstanding projects that we have right now is the iGel pilot project. We're managing that. Right now we have almost 30 agencies ready to go to use iGel. The biggest problem was you needed a 12 lead. To be able to acquire the 12 lead, and we have a lot of agencies that didn't want to spend money on doing that, or didn't have the money to spend on doing that, so that has slowed down on some of the agencies. If we release that, and that's not our choice, when we initially put it in, we didn't have the 12 lead in there, but the state did include all adjuncts, so it had to go through that way. We recently added, in the New York's Bureau of EMS, they added a forms to their portals. They added a forms website that has all the forms that you use. So you can go on there and pick out the form, whether it's operations, educational, and fill in the form and just send it out to them. It's much easier than it used to be. Well, our next HVREMSCO and CMAC meeting will be May 9th. 9th and 10th up in Troy again. Our REMAC meeting is going to be March 6th. It'll be here at 9:30 a.m. Our next HVREMSCO meeting will be the 17th. We also have an RTAC meeting that's coming up February 24th, if anybody's interested in attending that, at 9:30, and that's going to be at Westchester Medical Center. And that's all that I have.
Any questions for Bill? Hearing none. Jeffrey, QAQI?
Work continues on improving the dashboard. The biggest thing that we've got coming up is on March 29th, ESO will be here, not this building, but we're still looking for a venue in Dutchess County to have kind of a large group session with their clients from Remo, clients from Westchester, and most importantly, clients from here. There'll be two sessions, one at 10 in the morning, the other at 6:30 in the evening, which should accommodate both sides of the fence, I would hope. I know that they have been fairly active with fixing their issues, or at least giving us a timetable of the issues and their expected fix dates. They have been very cooperative with that since our meeting in Westmoreland at the end of November. I know that they gave David some really good stuff, and they are due to give us some decent stuff too, to take a look at specifically ESO clients and to figure out where the problems are before they become larger problems, which is probably the most important thing. Zoll data does not appear to be as much of an issue as the state first anticipated. Data seems to be flowing fairly smoothly. We have a meeting with Image Trend tomorrow because they're changing a workflow for the regional elite sites to the state sites. So we shouldn't see any issues with that, but just an awareness that if you see things not working the way they have normally worked, that may be why, and shoot me an email and we'll fix it. Other than that, any questions?
How big of a venue do you need?
We need at least 75, room for 75 people.
So be back?
You got room for 75 people there?
I don't know, I never counted them, but.
Roundabout Fire would be a perfect place, it's right off of 84 and 52. Either that or East Fishkill, both of them right off of 84.
Yep.
Yeah.
I hope that.
And Roundabout and East Fishkill have rooms big enough to.
They have holes, yeah.
Yeah. All right, good. Steve,
What were the dates for ESO?
March 29th,
As you said, 2 sessions.
2 sessions.
John, if you don't mind, maybe either in an email later, you could just share the contact information for
I
those
can schedule it.
locations for Jeff, make it a little easier for Don to know. Thank you. Any other questions for Jeff?
Dave,
Yes, sir.
just to add, ESO contacted me in reference to e-PCR compliance for the hospitals. And I said one of the biggest hurdles, and with Jeff's input as well, one of the biggest hurdles for agencies to join the HDE with ESO is the cost. They have updated their software, which allows them to offer the product for free to the agencies. I'm waiting for confirmation from higher ups at ESO. I gave them a list of 64 agencies that I would expect them to provide that service to, which would allow Nuvance, we use Zoll Care Exchange for the processing of the PCRs. You would be able to take your PCRs, send them to us electronically, there would be no more faxing, and you would also be able to have EMS charts login to be able to do quality reviews as well as any billing if you potentially do billing. But that product from ESO would be free, and on our side from Nuvance Hospitals, it's a free product to you as well. So number one, quality and PCR compliance combined, we would be able to get into like 98% of our PCRs would be electronically captured, which would be a great achievement for the region, because then we know where we can go to do quality metrics and that type of stuff. So, any questions on that, see me individually.
Anything else on QI? No? Good. All right, we're gonna move over to committee reports. I don't believe that David submitted a training committee report, but they have a meeting on Tuesday morning, so they're all meeting, and a lot of it's dealing with the changes that are coming on. So unfortunately, Dr. Papish is not here. So we don't have the medical director or anybody on the protocol committee? Want to comment? No? Helicopter report? Steve?
Good evening, everyone. A few quick updates, regionally speaking. So LifeNet 7.5, which is based out of Sullivan County at Catskill Regional, that's now in its final permanent aircraft. So that's going to be EC 130 helicopter, the T2 variant. The biggest update there from what we've seen in the past year since we upgraded our fleet is a lot more weight capacity for lift, in addition to a permanent third seat. So that's been in service full time for about a month now. We've already completed 3 or 4 flights where we were able to take a parent, guardian, or another family member or corrections officer with no issues so far. As long as the patient and the rider have reasonable weight and there's no other safety concerns, we're going to be able to reliably take riders with us in that aircraft moving forward. Additionally, with a lot of help from Ulster 911, Mobile Life for several years, and also Westchester Medical, we've opened an on-site helipad at the Health Alliance campus on Mary's Ave. So that's helped reduce some of the stress on local 911 ambulances that have provided transport from the state police barracks to the hospital back and forth. And it's also cut down on a lot of hospital time for those patients. And then the final update I have for everyone is we're actually opening a new base March of this year, so just about a month away in Oneida County. So that aircraft won't be responding down here for scene flights with any frequency by any means, but more importantly, it's going to contribute to our overall footprint throughout New York State. We've seen a lot longer response times and transport times just with some of the healthcare changes with the hospitals and the lack of availability for specialty care, where our local resources here in the Hudson Valley have been going up into central New York with the Capital District to backfill. Having this additional resource there will keep our aircraft in their primary jurisdiction more reliably, so we should see better in-service and response times for that. The only other update, moving forward, we're gonna have quarterly reports out of the helicopter committee, joint with LifeNet and Hackensack, so we can have one cohesive piece of data for everyone to see on our response patterns.
Excellent. We were having a conversation just before this meeting started. Can you kind of just brief the group, now that the state's approved the medevacs for blood, are you guys seeing a big use for it? Is it, how's that program going for you?
Very well. I'm not sure what my expectations were going in. I believe it was January 16th of 2022, our first aircraft began carrying 2 units of PRVC and 1 unit of plasma on every scene flight. We saw, I believe, just about 100 utilizations last year, strictly for scene flights. That doesn't count any of our inter-facility missions, where we've also seen an improvement just from some of these critical access hospitals with limited resources. They'll get these traumas or these really critical ill persons, and they'll dump their entire blood bank on them before they can get a transport unit, where we've actually supplemented that care with additional blood products of our own. The process has been going very well as far as restocking that blood. I believe we can get fresh blood into the base after use in as little as 4 hours on some instances. So we've seen a pretty good use throughout a lot of our trauma patients between LifeNet units and Hackensack, who also carries it. But we've also seen a number of medical calls from GI bleeds, surgical complications, and others where those products have been used. So we've seen a lot of improvement, and hopefully we'll have some good data to move forward with in the near future as well.
In your opinion, do you ever see it moving to a ground ambulance situation, or?
I don't think it'll be a universal application. I think
Sure.
the biggest impediment, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen this through some of the coverage of us getting the blood, is collaborating with the blood bank and the state on some of the policies. We're over a year into this process, and the state still hasn't really started the conversation on what they want those policies and procedures to look like to go along with the legislation, let alone come to any consensus of that nature.
Right.
The only other primary impediment is just the relationship and keeping that blood product stable and at the right temperatures and the right accountability, especially with some of the shortages we're seeing and in the rural areas where we're more likely to see a positive outcome and a positive impact on those patients. It's that much more difficult to maintain them in-house. I hope we'll see it in the future. We're seeing a lot of critically ill people that can benefit from that, and we're not always going to be there, whether it's for weather or another reason. So having that product available to these patients, regardless of our availability, will be a huge benefit to get to that point.
Which areas are carrying the product?
All of New York State.
All
All of New York State that we cover, so essentially Finger Lakes, like Rochester-ish, Central Falls area east, all of our aircraft have the products.
Go ahead. Please, Anthony.
I don't mean this to be a funny question, but what is reasonable weight for the third passenger?
I was thinking about that too. What's
So
your
I
weight load
believe,
on
generally speaking, so it depends day to day based on the crew weight between the pilots and the clinicians, and the fuel that they're carrying at the time. Generally speaking, don't hold me to this, I'll get some better figures for you next time, but we've been reliably seeing over 400 pounds of weight lift capacity for those aircraft.
That's the whole crew and the patient and the passenger.
Patient and passenger, not including the crew.
Oh, patient passenger would have to be equal.
So as far as the patient, the primary issue that we might run into more than weight is actually girth for what that litter can carry. We really, knock on wood, haven't run into any instances where we haven't been able to accommodate the patient weight with the new aircraft. And the other benefit, especially with Air 2 and also 7-1 out of Albany, which can regularly respond to the northern part of the Hudson Valley region, that's been upgraded to a 145, and those have incredible weight capacities. We routinely take NICU isolate, the baby, 2 additional clinicians, and then a parent with 0 issue in that aircraft. So if we know from the get-go a rough estimate on that weight, if it busts the 130's capacity, generally we'll be able to backfill with another unit that can't take it.
Well, the interesting part of all of that, and again, I don't want to get too deep into it, but either today or yesterday, Bill received an email from the state where if your agency was already pre-approved, you know that there was a whole process from transporting patients with blood products already from transferring hospital to receiving hospital, and you had to be approved by Wadsworth to be able to do that. Well, they just sent out an email that we were still trying to decipher what it means and going through the policies, where now they're saying program agencies can be responsible for contracting with the transferring hospital and then subsequently contracting with the ambulance services to transfer patients from the hospitals. What does that mean? Don't ask the questions, because it literally just hit, and we were deep diving it before this meeting, and it's way too deep to figure out. There's more questions than answers.
Remo's gonna be very upset that you told me this. So
What's that?
On my
Yeah.
side, it's gonna be just, it's wrought with legal weighing in and everything, and just getting all of that stuff done. That's what the delays have all been.
Right. So again, I can speak for it from my organization, because it's a nightmare. I mean, we had to have a contract with every single hospital to be able to do it, and then quality.
Both the sending and the receiving.
correct.
No, I didn't have to have a contract with the receiving, it was just the sending, but the paperwork is a nightmare, because there's paperwork at the pickup, there's paperwork at delivery, there's paperwork that has to then go back to the sending hospital for all the quality improvement of it. And what we were on face value looking at and going, how would we do that for agencies? You know, I can do it for an organization, how do we do it as a program agency for multiple? So if you read it coming out in emails, we're aware of it, and we're gonna spend the next several weeks trying to figure out what it means, how it works, and even if we could pull it off. You know, unfortunately, one of the things that we have to face here inside, you know, this regional council is, and it's, if you listen to any of the state meetings, there hasn't been a funding increase into the program agencies in over 20 years. So we keep trying to figure out every year when expenses go up, how do we still spend that same amount of money and spread it even thinner when it goes through there? So trying to take something on like this, at face value, seems like it would be a nightmare in logistical tracking. So,
I can confirm that for you.
what's that?
I can confirm that for you.
So, we're gonna look at it, see where it goes. Literally, I don't think this email, today or yesterday?
Yesterday, I got it.
Yesterday.
But
I read it
didn't
today.
until this
We were
morning.
reading it today, and it's
Talk about
it's
unfunded
numbing.
mandates. I mean, that seems like an incredible burden to put on the
It still allows agencies to contract directly with hospitals and go at, but this, in the face value of the overview of the email, they're trying to streamline it so that program agencies could allow multiple agencies to be able to do it. And any of you that have ever dealt with bureaucracy knows that can become a nightmare, so. We're looking at it, and that's as far as I can tell. So if you see it, don't flood the regional office with a bunch of emails going, you know, when can we start moving these patients too with blood? Because it's gonna take weeks, if not months, of paperwork to figure out whether this, how it would get done and whether we could do it or not, so. That's just full disclosure, but I appreciate that update, because that's where the conversation come in, of, you know, how are the helicopters doing with the blood products?
Yeah, absolutely, and we're painfully familiar with that process with the Wadsworth Lab and all the ambulance transfusion service agreements, so if you guys ever have any questions, please reach out, and if I can't answer it, we got.
It's painful, I can attest to that. Okay, very good. Glenn is not here, and I don't believe we had any.
No, we have nothing.
We have nothing on a transportation committee,
Nope.
right? Now, anybody that looked at the agendas and sees that public information and education and policies and procedure committees are still looking for a chair. We have two choices here, guys. I can voluntold you. Right? I have that authority, and then you can vote me out of office in a couple of months. Or somebody can step up to the plate, or we as a committee need to have a bylaws committee and decide whether you want these committees to exist anymore or not. They have not functioned in well over
3 years.
a couple of years, a while. So the question has to be asked, do we keep these committees live? They will require bylaws changes if we're gonna go. So I want you to think about it. I can voluntold, and you can refuse to do the job, I totally get it. I'd much rather have somebody step up to the plate and run with the ball. What I can assure you is it's not a ton of time. Most of it is usually a meeting between our regular council meetings. Maybe two if there's a big item on the agenda, but for the most part, it's not. And again, I'll remind the committee that we all voted to regulate every delegate and every alternate to sit on at least one committee.
Who's on the bylaws committee?
What's that?
Who is on the bylaws committee?
I would have to go back and defer to
That's in
Karen.
bylaws.
Albie is the chairman of the bylaws committee, but that's not either one of these,
No, I know, I'm just.
right? So there is a bylaw committee, but these are public information and education and policy and procedures committee. So think about it, right?
The parameters for those committees are spelled out in the bylaws, correct?
Correct. And I have a copy of the bylaws here, if anybody'd like to see them.
Are
As
they
we were
available
comparing them.
online?
What's that?
Are the bylaws available online? on
Yes.
your site?
Yes, right? The
Yes.
most current version is
Yes.
available. I keep a copy on my laptop so that I can reference it every time somebody asks a legal question. I can go back and say, okay, let me make sure I'm not violating our own bylaws here, but, so yes, they are available. So again, please, we'd love to have the help. Which takes us right to legislative and bylaws, and unfortunately Albie is not able to be here tonight.
Dave,
Yes,
we got a couple of questions about committees. The
Yes.
education committee, I would be interested on.
okay, Norma, what I'm gonna ask you to do is if you could send that in writing over to Karen.
Okay.
And then she'll forward it off to Dave Violante, who's the chairman.
Okay.
And then go from there.
Okay,
That's not a problem. We just like to have a paperwork trail.
sure. I
So
know-
that somebody doesn't come back and accuse us of voluntolding somebody. It's just so much easier that way. But yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much. Okay, everything's getting on here. So legislative and bylaws. Okay, so I was gonna save this off, to new business, but I'm gonna throw it in here in bylaws now, even though Albie's not here. But I am gonna be generating an email for him, and asking him and his committee to take a look at our bylaws. And specifically what I was looking at, myself, Bill, Terry, Tim, was anybody else at state council meetings 2 weeks ago? Bob was there. One of the things that came up, if you were there or you got an opportunity to listen to it, in the systems committee, there was an appeal to a CON process. That eventually went to HVREMSCO. The appeal was based on the fact that an organization was looking to change a muni CON to a permanent CON, which happens after 2 years, but it has to be approved by the local HVREMSCO. It was appealed because the local HVREMSCO had made the decision not to transfer the muni CON to a permanent CON because they didn't feel that there was need. That was appealed and sent to the state because of their voting members, and Bill, help me out if I say this incorrectly. They had to have a majority of the voting members on the committee, not the voting members at the meeting in which it was decided. So that's happened twice now. That happened with this muni CON to a regular CON, and it happened on another expansion of a CON a couple of meetings ago. So in my free time, when I'm doing nothing else, I start thinking about what would we do if we were presented with that situation. So again, I deep dove our bylaws. Our bylaws are not specific. So what I'm going to ask Albie and his team to do is add some language into our bylaws that allow a motion to move forward with 51% of the voting members present for the vote. And if you look at, and where I'm taking this from, if you look at, Bill was nice enough to print them out for me, HVREMSCO's bylaws, that's the way theirs are written. So, that was gonna be a suggestion. I wanna open that up for discussion so that we can figure out what we're gonna do, or if we wanna move for that. Tim was first, if you don't mind, Bob.
So,
Go ahead.
if I remember correctly from last week, actually, let me rephrase that. Did that HVREMSCO have a quorum when they made that vote? Do you remember?
Yes,
Okay, so they had a quorum of their voting members.
they had a quorum, but What happened was, and I'll give you an example of ours, right? We have 24 voting members, either delegates or alternates, so 24 votes can be passed. We need 13 to have a quorum. So, if we vote on a motion and 9 of those members vote to pass something, and then the other 4 decide, no, I'm gonna vote against it, 9 is not greater than 13, which means the appeals got appealed because you needed 13 votes for something to go either positive or negative. And if I'm saying this wrong, Terry, please,
No, that's.
you know, so what happens is when you read HVREMSCO's bylaws, it says very clearly 51% of the members eligible to vote that voted on that matter. Ours do not say that. So that was gonna be my motion to clean it up, so that if we have, because we have 24 members, if we have 14 people show up, but only 10 vote positive and 4 vote negative, I don't want something to get appealed.
So why
So
don't
we're
we
trying to
do
go
this?
through process.
So I sit on legend bylaws, I'll reach out to Albie, and that was why I asked that question. Because
Okay.
I wanted to clarify exactly what you were looking for, and I agree with that makes sense. So what I'll do is I'll reach out to Albie, we'll come up with a draft, I'll get it to you guys, and then maybe at the next meeting we can, because if I'm not mistaken, it has to sit for 30 days.
Correct. So it would have to be brought up at the next May meeting, and then it wouldn't, we couldn't vote on it until the September meeting.
Without reading the bylaws, I would imagine that we'd have to have a second motion from the bylaws committee to the main
Correct.
body, and then it would sit till the next
Correct.
meeting, and we vote on it in May.
Correct. Now, I just want to give some of the other comments. Bob, you had one?
Just to clarify, from what I remember from the meeting, that particular HVREMSCO, when they voted that night, the majority of the people present did vote in favor of the CRN, did they not? Because it was like 11
No, that,
votes.
if I'm correct, and again, you guys were there too,
Yeah,
they voted not to approve the muni CON to a permanent CON,
yeah,
but
but I
that
thought
was
they had,
appealed.
I thought they had 11
Was it
yes
the other
votes
way?
and they needed
It was
16.
the other way around, they
Okay,
voted
so,
yes to not oppose, and this was one of those no means yes and yes means no.
I was gonna say,
But they voted yes to not approve the HVREMSCO's decision or something.
Well,
The end result was that the CON got passed, it was very
Yeah.
confusing,
Yeah.
especially.
because it
when
got
was
overturned.
No, but I was talking about the original HVREMSCO vote.
Oh, what was,
I thought that they had like 11 yes votes, but they needed 16, and that's why it didn't
well,
pass.
based on the interpretation of the bylaws, which is, and that's why it was
Because it
appealed,
was,
right?
yeah, and that's why we're looking at this, because if
We don't wanna
their
put-
bylaws were written like the HVREMSCO's bylaws, they would have never needed that appeal in the first place.
Correct.
Oh, it would have been.
Correct.
Right, so basically they
So-
approved it, but they didn't have enough voting
It-
members there to approve
Right.
it. So it went to, it came up to
I thought it was
higher
to
level.
deny it, which is why it got
Actually,
appealed.
That's why, yeah.
They had enough members, but they actually,
HVREMSCO denied it.
their HVREMSCO voted to deny the transfer.
Right.
And then obviously the municipality appealed it. It went to SEMSCO. SEMSCO overturned
Right.
the,
Yeah, that whole.
Remax
yes,
decision.
was like-
or not the
very
REMAC, but the
confusing.
REMSCO's decision.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to avoid, right, and that's, it sounds convoluted, and yes, if you haven't sat through a state meeting, yes means no and no means yes, is confusing as the dickens. I'm trying to avoid that here. I wanna make sure that when this body makes a decision, we don't have to worry about it being appealed because somebody doesn't like the way the people that were here to make the vote
It'll be
voted.
less likely that it'll be appealed.
Oh, they can always
For that
appeal
reason.
it, right, that, for that reason.
We want yes to be yes and no to be no.
Yes, that would be great.
Put that in the bylaws, too.
Any other questions on that? I mean, if you have any other comments or you'd like something else run through there, I mean, definitely let Tim know, because he's gonna run that along, up with Albie. So again, I just trying to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. You know, if we get appealed on something, I'd rather it be not on procedural. So, that's all. Tim, anything on community paramedicine, sir?
Well, I was gonna say other than what was in Part S, but you're gonna be talking about Part S later on, right, so.
No, we were gonna go just because I wanted to keep the conversation totally around
And Dave's not here, so, you know.
the 25 points of the sustainability
Oh, the
tax.
sustainability guide, okay, so,
Correct.
so in
So
the
not
Part
Part
S, so the governor proposed a Part S version of her budget proposal, which is similar to what Part F was last year. It was basically a redo of that based on input received from a variety of people, a couple of which were at the table. And we presented that to Ryan, who in turn presented it to the governor's office. That was or the governor's budget people anyway, that was the intent. So there is a section of Part S that speaks to the definition of EMS, that speaks to the definition of paramedics and EMTs, and in particular, mobile integrated healthcare. So during SEMSCO at the legislative committee, that all was discussed, and actually this could be part of the legislative report, really.
Mhm.
So that all was discussed, and Ryan, so there was another section in Part S that was 3088 or something like that? 3033, right, I was close, I completed the three. 3033 was proposed as a new section to create 10 EMS districts throughout the state that would line up with the economic development zones throughout the state. That would be somewhat autonomous outside of HVREMSCOs and SEMSCOs, and my understanding was would report directly to the Bureau. Well, I lit everybody's hair on fire, and it was discussed at the legislative committee. Ryan, who sat at that committee table, made the suggestion that if we pull that out, we being the state, if we pull that out, which from my perspective was unheard of, especially at that early stage, if we get that pulled out of the governor's budget proposal, would everybody be okay with the CON piece? There was a lot of discussion, but it was voted that that would be a seconded motion to go to SEMSCO, at which table it was voted on to approve that as a recommendation to the governor's budget staff, I guess, or to the governor herself. So what was voted on was that the Part S provisions that were recommended by the governor would be endorsed by SEMSCO minus 3033, which was the district's piece. Personally, I think that's fraught with danger because of the fact that it would remove from REMSCOs the ability to vote on CONs. That would be kicked up to SEMSCO. And the reasoning was that so many of those are appealed and wind up at SEMSCO anyway, it would shorten the process. So I had a conversation with Ryan afterward, and I'll get back to the mobile integrated healthcare piece in a second, but I had a conversation with Ryan right after the main body of SEMSCO ended on Wednesday last week. And I told him what I just said. I said, I think that's a problem. Have you looked at all of the applications for CONs or expansions or whatever the case may be that don't wind up at the SEMSCO table, that get adjudicated at REMSCOs and are dealt with efficiently? What about all of those? Because that would lengthen that process. And what he told me was very interesting. What he said was that he proposed to me, what if we added in a piece that would leave those REMSCOs alone that wanted to continue to do that, and the REMSCOs, of which apparently there are a few throughout the state, North Country, Western Tier, Southern Tier, whatever, that don't want to deal with it or don't deal with that at all or deal with it effectively, would then go to SEMSCO. And I said, well, okay, that makes sense. If it's not being dealt with, sure, it's got to be dealt with somewhere. So I don't know where that's going to go, but in the rest of the Part S, were a lot of definition changes, and if you haven't already looked at it, I encourage you to look at it. And mobile integrated healthcare was in there. We will see what happens with that. NISNA lobbied hard against it the last time. It didn't go anywhere because of that. Many other bodies, NISFERA, Onion, we had some problems with a lot of the language in there, and it didn't go anywhere last year. This year, it actually might. So we might get mobile integrated healthcare codified in Article 30, or at least in regs. And that might allow those programs that are doing CP to continue to do those programs. Several meetings ago, Ryan stated also alleged that any CP program would end once the executive orders have been allowed currently, even those programs that predated the pandemic in the first place. So we'll see. There has to be one House bills that will be all merged together. The language has to be the same for it to make it through. We'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting budget session. So.
Beautiful. Any questions for Tim? And he did a phenomenal job of kind of summarizing a lot of the conversation that went out. Terry, is there anything that you can add to that, or?
You got it.
Got it all? Perfect. All right. Again, a lot of that stuff happens out. I'm just going to jump over to the State EMS Council. I'll come back to awards and the nominating committee in just a second. But David sent out his report from CMAC HVREMSCO, did everybody on the chair get it? All right, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them away. Again, Bob was there, Terry was there, Rich was there, Bill was there, I was there. You know, we'll be happy to try and tell you what some of the conversations were. Most of them were productive. So again, when you read through the report, I think everybody's on the same page of where they want to go. There's some differences slightly, but for the first time in a long time, people are finally realizing that we have to give a little if we're going to get a little. And that really seems to be what the atmosphere is. And if I'm mischaracterizing that, please correct me, but it just seems like for the first time in a really long time, people are realizing if we don't do something, and I think the thing that drove home for me, and it seemed to resonate through the entire group that was there that day, was for 2 years in a row we've made the governor's State of the State address. If we miss this opportunity this year, nobody has any faith that EMS will ever be mentioned again in the very near future.
That's because of all the pushback she received, you know, last year, and if we do give her pushback again this year, we'll never get another bite of that apple.
So
I agree.
it's time for us to,
Step up.
if we're gonna get an apple pie, we gotta eat a little humble pie. So that's really where it's gonna go. So,
Write that down.
is that what it is? You like that? I just trademarked that, by the way. Good, let's go back to awards. Desiree's not here, but what I would like to do is,
Terry's gonna do.
Terry's here.
I'm here.
Thank you.
The awards packets are going to be due on May 26th. This year's awards are due to the DOH by Friday, June 30th. They are due to the REMSCO by Friday, May 26th. The awards committee is going to meet on Wednesday, June 14th, time to be determined. The committee as it stands at this point is Desiree, Chris Egme, Wayne Chan, myself, Neil Meduga.
Medell.
I was close, and Brendan Whalen. Remember, the awards are submitted to the REMSCO or the recipients of your county awards. EMS does amazing things, and so very often goes unnoticed. We need to be sure that we don't let this happen anymore. We've got to start recognizing our own people. Continue to promote the positive, discourage the negative. Karen is gonna be the gatekeeper of the submissions to turn over to the review committee. Please get them into her on time so we can be sure Hudson Valley EMS region is recognized at the state level.
Nice. And again, in full disclosure, last couple of years, the Hudson Valley has really stepped up to the plate and taken home. I mean, I can't remember a single year where we've gone by where there hasn't been at least a couple of recipients, winners from the Hudson Valley. In 1 year, there was 4 or 5. So again, your people have a very real chance of not only winning their county, but then the regional award, and then going directly to the state. So to echo what Terry said, please encourage your agencies back in your counties to acknowledge the people that are working hard every single day. And if you don't have any people working hard, you're not looking, because they're working.
It doesn't
Right?
matter if it's,
They are
if
working.
it's a small act or a grandioso act. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you know, the trauma in the middle of the street where 7 people died and everybody did a great job getting to the hospital. It could be the EVP that, you know, you're holding their hand 7 days a week, 6 times a day. You know, your crew hasn't lost their mind. They've treated the patient with respect every single time they've done it. You know, recognize them for the little things as well as the big things. It goes a long way.
It can be as simple of a recognition of somebody that comes to a regional council meeting and brings 24 donuts and sets them on the table out there. Okay? So whether that's a negative recognition or a positive recognition,
Looking for them, they're in here.
they probably don't want to be carried home. So I would encourage you to, again, we're laughing at that, but it's the simple little things of recognizing the people inside your organizations. they make the difference. They're the ones that are doing it, so very good. Nominating committee, Mr. Cuomo.
Okay, well, it is that time of year again. Next meeting will be our annual meeting, and we'll be having elections. So I'll be scheduling a meeting of the nominating committee between now and then. Karen, who else is on the nominating committee right now?
What?
Who are the other members of the nominating committee? Okay, well, you'll be getting an email soon. In the meantime.
Can I interrupt for a minute?
Yes.
If you don't think you're on the nominating committee and you're not sure which committee you're on, call us. We'll be happy to put you on one.
Yes.
I remember having a phone call that we had it,
Okay,
so I think I'm.
okay, all right, good.
If
Well,
not, I will be.
all right, cool. In the meantime, anyone who is interested in running for office, including the incumbents,
Absolutely.
please send
Anyone?
something in writing to Karen by email, and we will gladly look at all that, and we'll put together a slate in time for the next meeting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Bob. All right, so that's good. All right, Sadie, Mounts Council, as I said to you before, everybody got a copy of David's report. Hopefully you get to read it. Does anybody that wasn't there have any questions, concerns, things that you didn't understand or want to vent about? We'll be happy to entertain it. Again, Tim was there, Terry was there, Bob was there, Bill, myself, Rich was there.
One thing we should point out are that 15 of the 25 points in the sustainability report were in the governor's hard-ass proposal, which is a big, big deal.
It's like they knew.
One of the other things with, at the state meeting, the Quality Metrics Committee came out with a new QA/QI manual, which will be released soon. It was in draft, it's been looked at, now they're just gonna put the final touches on it, so you'll be see that coming out shortly.
Good. Yeah, and I think the biggest question that came out that was negative towards that, was that going to be another unfunded mandate? And I think the answer was answered very clearly of no. It's going to be a guide document for you to better your agency, to be able to utilize some of the tools that, you know, the region has and the state has as far as metrics. Again, they had two, you know, data metrics up just outside of the meeting room that people could look and play with. And for those of you that, you know, don't spend a lot of time crunching all the numbers, there are people that do. Look, Jeffrey's enjoyed it, you know. But there's a ton of data, and, you know, he's had demonstrations before on what's available and what it can do and how it can help your organization. So please take advantage of it if you can. So, Anthony, anything on the 2025?
So Karen and I was, but, I mean, like, this kind of took over, right? So, I'm not exactly sure.
So your committee's going to adopt that and run with it? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, there's definitely a lot of questions on this. I mean, like, for example, number 11, it has those metrics you were talking about, right? The 80, 85, 90, 95%. Don't necessarily dispute that, but, you know, in order to collect that information, and you have to data crunch PSAP data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And PSAP don't have a standard, I mean, it's a pain in the ass,
I'm
okay?
laughing because before you can crunch it, you actually have to have it.
Yeah.
You have to obtain it.
All right, so I'm just gonna kind of reel this in a little bit, because I want to save this really to the new business, when we start punching through some of that. But the biggest thing that I think that we should take away is, these were 25 recommendations on how to fix the system. What there was not in there was the minute details and logistics of how each one of those would get done. We've got to agree, yes, we like those, and this is what we're gonna run with, and then once it is, then there has to be a tag, and there has to be a committee, and then they start running through all the logistics from, you know, A to ZZZ, because it's going to be time consuming and it's gonna be there. But we need someplace to start, right?
Yeah.
We need to all recognize that we could be better, not only individually, organizationally, but regionally, and then ultimately statewide. we can be better. How do we get there? And I think that that's a lot of theirs. So we'll spend a little more time kind of diving into that, and
Yeah.
hopefully that's where we're at for there.
So I guess the committee could use some direction as to, how to realign ourselves with.
I'm kind of hoping that an open discussion
Okay.
in just a few minutes will kind of get us to where we think as a team we should be going. So that was good.
So, so Karen reminded me, so the HERO program, we also think that's a good idea to address the 2025 incentives, but like how you have to rely, while the state approved the law, now you have to rely on the taxing entities in order to adopt it, implement it, what the conditions may be. And maybe it's something that maybe the region sends a letter out to someone, I'm not sure, the county executives, or I don't know what it is.
These are all great discussions for ultimately a committee, right? So if we decide that we're gonna put a tag together and they're gonna tackle a specific subject, that's a great thing for that tag to then figure out, okay, what is our mission? What are our goals? What are our objectives? And what are the logistics to reach those goals and objectives?
So
Nothing's gonna be fixed overnight,
Okay.
but
What?
we need to, nothing's going to get fixed overnight, but we need a goal, right?
Yeah.
Where are we going? And that's really what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, I don't even remember how long you wrestled me into this position. We dreamed up that 2025, and I think it was 2021, because I think it was 4 years out or 5 years out.
It was like a year after we did that,
Yeah.
the summit.
Yeah.
Sure. So it was just, it was a, kind of a dream I had of, where are we gonna be? What does this place look like 5 years from now? And that's really where that was born out of, with no real guidance. I mean, I literally just took an idea and threw it at you and said, run with it.
So I guess for the record, the committee recommends promoting the HERO program.
Okay, good. So we'll go from there. All right, Nick is not here, right? Nick is not going to be here. So here's the question, ladies and gentlemen. This data tag, do we need it anymore? Jeff and I were having a conversation about this earlier. Does anyone feel that the data usage tag is necessary anymore with the analytics being done and available on the regional website? Show of hands that think we should keep that tag. Not seeing any, we will remove it from the agenda and retire that tag. Is that fair enough?
Need a motion for that?
Sure, let's have a motion.
Motion to remove the tag for data usage report.
Thank you. Seconded by Steve. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? You abstained, you're gonna be on the committee.
That's why nobody raised their hand.
I'm sure it's not. Wayne, I see Brenda couldn't make it tonight. Do you guys have any updates on your CISM tag?
Yes, Brenda's made contact with, some of the mental health people in Orange County, she's having conversations, I have a meeting there. I'm having meetings with the Orange County Fire to see if they're interested. There
Okay.
seems to be a choice of direction. Okay? Some of us think that it's just too big bringing in a fire and law because we're crossing borders. And we want to start with EMS and work our way out. Where
Okay.
others feel they'd rather go the whole ball of wax. And it's a slow grind because we have to talk to people on fire and police and get them on board.
So do you have anybody else on your tag, other than you and Brenda?
There's Dave is on there and there's a couple other people on there.
So David Violante?
Yeah.
So there's a representative from Dutchess. Kelly, you're on it, representative from Ulster. Do I have somebody willing to step up from Sullivan?
Y'all nominate Albie.
Sorry, Albie. Okay, so nobody from Sullivan yet. We'll try and find somebody. Is there anybody from Dutchess on there? Putnam? Please, we'd like to get each of your counties represented because you're going to make the contacts into your, agencies so much easier. And then the same thing with Rockland.
I'm on for Rockland.
Oh, you're already there, Terry. Okay, good. So again, what I'm encouraging is each one of the counties to have at least one representative so that it makes both Wayne and Brenda's job a little easier, because then they have a direct contact into all of the agencies and everything going through there. So the only way things move forward smoothly is with a lot of hands.
We'll have somebody from fire, we'll get somebody for you.
Outstanding, thank you. Again, I'm not trying to voluntold you, I'm trying to motivate people, but we really want to see this succeed. Everybody agrees it's a good thing. Okay, I'm going to open it up to new business. Anybody have anything?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. I'm going to go ahead and deny that for a minute. Okay, obviously, I had sent out, did everybody get a chance to do their homework?
I read this pages, I mean,
What pages are those?
the recommendation, key recommendations.
So the key recommendations, so you, instead of going through the whole report, you focused in on the
I
25.
didn't have much time.
I love it, because that's a start.
Yeah.
And that really summarized exactly what that committee was trying to do. And again, I'm not going to speak for that committee. What I'm going to do is yield the floor for about 5 minutes and let one of the individuals, or two of the individuals, if they both want to comment in, that sat on that committee, kind of give you an overview of how they got to where they were at and where this came from. So I'll turn it over to either Bill or Terry. You guys can shoot it out. Oh, look at fingers being pointed.
I was a very small screw in the cog, that's all I was.
Well, the first thing is there was a lot of small screws in the cogs because it was about 45 people in total that sat on this committee, and it was broken into 5 different groups, and each group addressed a particular problem. I happened to sit on staffing and operations, and we discussed everything there was to be about staffing, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And how we moved it forward was each person would come up with their ideas, and we would just record them. And then we would break that all down and figure out how you could do it, if it's something that's feasible, and if it was something that we wanted to move to the report. It worked very well. The group leaders were very efficient. They kept pushing. Mike Beninati, who was the chair of the TAG, he pushed all the group leaders, and they pushed everybody else that worked for him. We met on a weekly basis. Every week, every other week, you met with your TAG, your subcommittee. The following week, you met with the entire TAG. So everybody was always updated. We have a lot of references, and a lot of the information that was brought out crossed over to other TAGs. So we had an actual group that looked at what was crossing over from our TAG to the other TAGs and what was coming back and where it affected both groups. Sometimes they would discuss that. So it was a very well-oiled machine to get done, and it was a lot of work. I was very, very happy to be there, very proud of what came out of it. And I've seen some of the reports from a lot of people outside of the group that was there, the group of HVREMSCO, that have read it and have sent a lot of compliments back about it. So.
Some very talented people with 3 letters after the name and, books at the end of their
Yeah.
name. Just a ton of people that just did a lot of work. I was speaking with somebody the other day who said that they took it to one of their assemblymen or senators and looked at it, and he was absolutely flabbergasted at the state of the EMS at this point. He said he had no clue, no idea. And I think that's pretty much what we're gonna be looking at, is a lot of people who have no clue and no idea. Because we're animals. We go out, we do what we have to do because we know it has to get done. We don't complain about it, we don't whine, well, we do complain about it, we do whine about it, but, we're happy with pizza, and donuts. But, and we have to stop that. We really do. I mean, and I think the paper here tells us, the various levels we have to look at. And unfortunately, I look at this as a domino effect. We look at, bettering the mutual aid. We've got to cut down on the mutual aid. Well, how do we cut down on mutual aid? Better staffing. How do we do better staffing? Better money. It's dominoes. You can't fix one without fixing 4 others to get to that one.
Sure.
So, and the group did an amazing job.
So again, it's comes down to, and what's important to understand is that by rules and regulations, all the time and effort and all the extra meetings that were put into this took away from their personal lives, their careers, their organizations that are affiliated with, and it was a ton of heart putting into what they do. What impressed me more, and I think I tried to summarize it as quickly as possible because I knew if I wrote too long of an email, you'd stop reading it, was how many different disciplines of EMS came together with as many egos. And I don't know if you have them back in your regions and counties, but I know I've crossed paths with a couple of egos. I might even have one once in a while, more than once in a while if you ask my wife. But who came together and kind of put their ego in check at the door and agreed to work together. And realized that if we keep just saying, I don't want to do it because I've done it like this forever and this has to stay, we know where it's going. And we're not heading for a cliff anymore. We're looking over the cliff. And there isn't an agency out there that, isn't feeling a pinch either financially, logistically, operationally. You could be answering every one of your calls. And then I would look at half of you sitting around the room or staring back and going, how many calls are you answering for your neighboring agencies? And what kind of strain is that putting on your system? So it's not just about fixing me or us, it's about fixing a system. And that's difficult, right? And to, kind of elaborate on Terry's point, I have these conversations all the time, and even with politicians. Why is EMS so under-recognized? And my personal belief and philosophy is because we don't get to stand in front of the media on a regular basis and tout our accomplishments like law enforcement and fire services do. They get to tout it. We don't get to go and say, oh, by the way, we went to so-and-so's house the other day and saved them. We went to so-and-so and made a difference in their lives. Why? We're regulated by information laws that don't allow us to do that. So we're kind of boxed into this little tiny corner. So then it really becomes, then how do we promote ourselves? How do we get people to recognize? And it infuriates me, and I don't want to stand on the soapbox too long, I want you guys to talk. When you listen to people in elected positions who will stay to a group of citizens that firefighters are doing a job and we need them, and law enforcement are doing a job and we need them, and oh, by the way, those are the guys that drive the, or gals, that drive the ambulances and take patients to the hospital. Now, looking around the room, I fully recognize that that probably just set the hair on the back of your neck up on stands, as well as it should. He flies a helicopter, so he's probably, there's something not right because he's breathing too much jet fuel. I don't know. Go ahead, Terry.
Fire is sexy, and I don't mean that, take a look at it. You look at the front page of a newspaper, and there's a raging structure fire, and everybody's like, wow, look at that, those firemen, they were great. They can have, a department can roll a fire truck with 2 or 3 people on it, and I'm not bashing fire by any means. And they can rely on their neighbors for mutual aid to bring a different type of truck in and 2 or 3 more people on that truck. We can't. We have to put that truck out with minimum coverage in it and make maximum effort with minimum people. We can't put, the CPR being done on the front page because we have to cover the face or and who wants to see that? Who wants to see, blood and guts and gore other than us? Where do you go with it?
Equally, we all can stand around and think of ourselves as subpar to our other colleagues in emergency services, whether it's fire, law enforcement, wherever. And that's because we have an identity problem. That's really what it boils down to. We have an identity problem. And we need to figure out how to fix our identity inside the community so that people recognize who we are, what we do, how dedicated the people are, whether they're getting paid to do it, not getting paid to do it. Doesn't matter. It's a job. So that's really where the foundation of this is. So,
were you guys at the meeting where Mark Philippi had made the statement at State Council that one of the issues that we have is we drive an ambulance, we're EMTs, we're paramedics.
Yes.
You know, there's no singular identity to who we are. And Mark Philippi, when he was the chair, made the statement, you know what, as far as I'm concerned, we're all paramedics. What level of paramedicine are we?
Right.
And I think that's a good starting point, you know.
It's a good discussion
regardless
topic.
of whether you're a driver or a paramedic, you know, you're getting out of an ambulance. Give yourselves a title.
And that came up at the summit that we had over at Dutchess County, was it 2018, 19, whatever that was, and yeah, I was at that meeting with Philippi, and that's part of the problem. That's a cop, that's a fireman, those are those EMS guys.
That's the ambulance
That's the
driver.
ambulance driver, that's what, you hear it all kinds of different ways, because we can't agree ourselves what we wanna call each other, and what we wanna call ourselves.
I know what some of you have called me. No. Anthony, you had his hand up before.
No, I think you guys, I think we're all speaking to the choir here. I mean, I resonate with everything you guys are saying. Back at the last meeting, you said we are young, you know, we're not unified. You know, calling ourselves something that's 3 syllables or less would be nice, so that, you know, we could, so that they can remember who we are. You know, and I've been through a lot of summits and whatever, and you know, there's always a level of suspicion when we talk to each other, because, you know, with commercials versus vax versus whatever. Because, I mean, not so much with fire, because their districts are already predetermined, and not so much with vax, because their districts are small. But, you know, sharing information is also, there's a certain distrust that because the CONs are overlapping, that we have all these competitors.
Mhm.
And that doesn't help, because now we can't work together, because if I give you too much of my information, now you can use it against me, kind of thing, right? So, there is a lack of unity, you know, and we're stealing from each other to staff ambulances, right? So.
It's going back to Mother Jones,
So,
you know?
so with that being said, you know, why are we hesitating to share information? You know, I've had 6 people or 8 people or 20 people at the EMS agency that I ride with who work for the agency that he oversees. So why would we want to keep information from his people when his people are my people? You know, we're all working in the same places, you know. I think what we need to do is we need to stop identifying as paid, volunteer, and identify as emergency medical services. End of story. It doesn't matter if you're getting paid for the job and you're volunteering for the job. It doesn't matter. We all signed up for this for the same reason, whether it be to support our family or to give back to our community. We're doing it for the same reason. When you take the EMT class, you don't take a paid EMT class and a volunteer EMT class. Start looking at this as a career, and stop looking at it as, you know, something to do on the weekend.
Yeah, but I think you're looking at a situation where you have EMS is looked at, you have a certificate, we don't have a license. We are put down by the nurses union, we are taken to task by everybody. We are expected to be there like we're New York City, every corner there's an ambulance. There's expectations put on us by the community that at this point, we cannot live up to. And I think that's a problem right there. If you pass any fire department, they have their stats out on their board right on the road. How many of those stats are because they showed up at our calls? And I appreciate that, and I think it's supportive, and I love our fire departments. But a lot of those stats that you see are because they piggybacked off us. And I get it. I mean, that's the way it is, but I don't see our agencies with their stats sitting out there on the road, you know, if you're not part of the.
Sure.
And just to answer your, so just.
All right, hang on. I want to keep this so we're kind of staying in the line, all right?
Okay.
So again, I want your comments. That's what this open forum's about. But Steve was next. All right, just so that we're kind of keeping some decorum here. Bernice, have a great evening. Safe travels.
After the work.
Safe travels. Thank you. I didn't want you to sneak out and think that we're not going to miss you.
I will say though, I went through it, I put notes on all of this stuff, I'll send it to you
Please.
guys tomorrow, but the licensure, they discuss in here, everything I thought was brilliant. And I had my red pen ready to say, no, this was awesome, I think you guys put a lot of work into it, and there's a future for EMS. Thank you. Good night.
Safe travels, Bernice. Go ahead, Steve.
So one of the important things that came to mind from you two speaking was, even if we have cooperation amongst all the different entities that have their hands in the emergency medical response high, we don't have a common language.
You know what?
We don't have a common language to discuss it. Even if we had that will and that cooperation going forward. You know, I can walk into any agency, any county, and the same conversation about response successes, failures, you know, who got where, when level of care, no one has the same ability to share that information. We're operating off of completely different systems, whether it's EPCR, PSAP, CAD, what have you. We don't even really understand the problem. Because even within our own region, with everyone in this room, if we all gave an assignment today to say, hey, let's look at the agencies that are, you know, responding and who isn't, there's a very good chance that PSAPs don't have the infrastructure to give that data back. And one of the key themes from reading through this is scoring ourselves, grading ourselves to identify the problems. And I think one of the best steps we could possibly take is taking the opportunity to engage these PSAPs to see what their system capabilities are, and throughout the region, not just county by county, coming up with a universal scorecard. So moving forward, as we start to advocate for some of these projects within our local communities, or even region-wide, we're all talking the same language. We better understand, you know, what does a first response look like? Was this missed because there was no crew, like, you know, they mentioned in there the concept of on-duty versus off-duty, or is it because 3 other crews were already tied up on calls within their district or mutual aid? And I think without engaging directly with the PSAPs, understanding the data limitations or opportunities to add into that, we're gonna keep spinning our wheels.
Instead of coming up with our own, there may be something out there like NEMSIS for EMS data. There could be something out there already on a national level that could help us and is already built into some of the PSAP software.
Yeah, absolutely.
It depends who's running the PSAP though. Whether it's police, fire, public safety.
Junk in, junk out.
There's not, what are there, 10 different PSAPs in Rockland County, in a tiny little county?
Yes, but the standard, the software they're using is gonna be able to do the standard if it's a national standard, because none of them are doing their own.
It's the modules that each department purchases, it's what they decide to do with it, or what they decide to, how to use it. Yeah, the standard, I
understand, I'm just saying, instead of coming up with our own, we may wanna adopt one that's out there, that's all, I was just.
Go ahead, Anthony, you were next and then Dave.
Addition.
No, Dave can go.
Okay, go ahead, Dave.
So, 5 years ago, if any one of us would have ever thought that state chiefs would have said, there's an ambulance problem in New York State, and come to the table and actually talked and gave some concessions, we would have never seen that 5 years ago. And the fact that they did it in the last 18 months, it says something from where we are, and this document should be our guidance to open up those doors and allow us to be able to do things. And I will tell you that looking at a hospital system, I know that we have just as much work to do on our side as we do as EMS providers, or we have as legislators. The other thing is there's a county initiative. Each county has to have an initiative for EMS evaluation that's ongoing currently. I know that Ulster County is meeting with a third party to be able to pull their data together. Columbia County, I believe it's already gone to their final draft. I don't know where Dutchess is. John.
They just put an email out
So.
that you've got in March, right?
Yeah,
Chrissy?
March, yeah.
I was gonna say,
So,
Chrissy
I mean,
put the email out.
there's quite a-
Westchester's got one out,
Yeah.
you know, where they're already putting a group together
So
to do the exact same
the
thing.
data analytics are there, and it's the PSAPs are a piece of that data analytics.
So the big thing, and to Tim's point, the data's only gonna be as good as the data that was put in. And if it's bad data going in, you're gonna get bad data coming out. So, you know, anybody that's ever sat and looked at numbers before knows exactly, you know, what that means. So I think what a lot of this is, and I don't wanna go line by line, I kinda like the way this is going now, where people have like a passionate part of it, and I wanna continue that. But what I wanna echo is what Terry said before. This is a trickle-down change. And when we talk about trickle-down, it has to start somewhere, which means it has to start as a mandate coming out of the Commissioner of Health. This is what's going to happen. Then, once that line in the sand's drawn, then it's the Bureau of Health's problem, to the HVREMSCO, to the HVREMSCOs, to the county agents, or the counties, then to the individual agencies of how that's going to work. And the first thing, nobody's going to argue with it, is going to be funding. Getting the legislators and getting the governor to recognize, and it sounds like the governor is already fully on board of, money has to be put into EMS. But let's be honest, none of us sitting at the table want to see millions and millions of dollars dumped into something and then have a bad product at the end. We all have to sit at the table and then bring all of our colleagues in and admit, I'm not going to get everything I want. I'm going to have to make concessions. I'm going to have to give a little to get a little. And that's part of where that conversation has got to go. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, we talk about money, and it always seems to come back to money, but what everyone has to do next is that when some of that money gets to the agencies, they have to A, recognize that, and B, invest that money into salaries or whatever the case may be. For example, this year, Medicare gave an 8.5% increase. I mean, how many people around the table knew that? And Medicaid there are Medicaid increases proposed for this year in the governor's budget as well. So there is more money trickling in. It's not flooding in, but it is trickling in. And it's probably not even keeping up with cost of living. And when you talk about Medicaid, it doesn't even cover the cost of an ambulance trip. But, there is more money coming in. So I think everybody has to make sure that they're aware of that and advocate for even more money the following year and do everything you can to spend that money wisely.
And again, these are conversations for you guys to take back to your counties.
Agencies.
But I truly believe where it's going to be is we're just going to have to start to make some hard decisions. And some agencies are going to have to, collaborate with other agencies. And it may have always been we don't talk to them because they have yellow ambulances, and I don't talk to them because they have green ambulances. Well, guess what? They might all be blue when they're done because those two agencies combine together to be able to leverage those two townships to say the only way that we're going to survive is to be able to work together. And that's really where a lot of that has got to start. And it really comes back to, putting this infrastructure together to allow county coordinators to be able to do what they got to do. And Alex is sitting here, and I'm sure he'll be happy to tell you how difficult it is to convince a bunch of legislators to dole money out to a project that they don't know if they're going to get results from. Because it's easy to throw money at something and then a year, 2 years, or 5 years down the road have no results for it. So hang on, I just want to get Alex first, all right, turn. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was last meeting we talked about leadership, leadership training. I think that's to me that's a huge part. You talked about not being able to promote ourselves. And yeah, we're kind of boxed in by HIPAA, but I think there's ways without HIPAA that you can
fully agree.
You can promote your members, and I think that really comes down to the leadership of the organization, maybe the leadership of the county. In Sullivan, we've tried to make a pretty good initiative to highlight members on our Facebook pages from different agencies, bring EMS providers in front of the legislature, get some PR time. So we're trying to do the promoting, and I'm trying to push that to the local agencies also to try and participate in that. So I think we can tell our story and do it, but it really comes down to the leadership of the organizations to help them promote that, We talked about the leadership training. I think that would be great if we could, collectively focus on that. We talked about taking, I think it was this group, we talked about taking the fire officer training and converting that to EMS officer training.
Sure.
Kind of like OFPC does for the fire side. The second thing, again, the identity. And something I preach a lot, in my county, I don't know if it's just a county thing, but, let's say, when a firefighter shows up, they've got turnout gear on, they've got a helmet on, they look pretty, they play the role, When a volunteer shows up, do they always show up in a uniform of some sort, or do they show up in their best holy jeans, Might be minor, but in the perception of the public, how do we standardize that? And the last piece is funding, and then I'll shut up. But, we rely on Medicare, Medicaid, insurance funding. We talk about trying to be like the police agencies and the fire agencies. Do they rely on how many calls they go to as a revenue generator? Or, does the fire service rely on if homeowners insurance is gonna pay the bill for them putting out the fire, no. And, you know, I think the funding model has to be really looked at as, if we wanna be equal to the others, yeah, it hurts, you know, but, you know, I say it all the time in my area, if I paid I have a zero, on my tax bill, I pay zero for ambulance, I pay $400 a year for my fire department tax. You know, if everybody paid $400 for fire, $400 for EMS on their, you know, as much as people don't wanna be taxed, but if we wanna be equal, you know, let's not worry about the funding stream and gauge our service based on our funding, you know, and, you know, we can't always be the nice guys, so, okay, so EMS is gonna cost you, know, people want to have that expectation of service, let's fund it like we do police and fire. And
Outstanding. All right, Terry.
So, I look at a lot of this as like individual towns, like in Rockland County, we have individual townships that, North Rockland, Stony Point Ambulance, Haverstraw Ambulance. Our town supervisors are never gonna combine the two of them together because they have their little fiefdoms. So Stony Point, they're getting their money, Haverstraw's getting their money, and they're never gonna combine that. You know, would it be best to combine the two agencies? In my opinion, absolutely. Combine the two agencies, keep the truck blue, keep the truck red and white, and name it North Rockland EMS. Who cares
So I
what
was
color
trying to
the
use
truck
green
is?
and yellow, because I didn't think there was any, green and yellow, so I was singling any agency out.
I don't know if that's, you know, if that's how it is in the entire world. I don't know how, I'm specific to my own areas, so, you know, that's a piece of it. Leadership, I'm gonna tell you, leadership is exactly, in my opinion, another problem that we have. You know, you have EMS agency that you talk about uniforms, the volunteer comes out wearing navy blue pants, the right color shoes, and a t-shirt. The paid staff comes out, maybe they're wearing a button-down shirt or they've got a pullover. Again, if the staff shows up, the paid staff, let's go there, shows up not wearing the proper uniform, who's there to tell them, go home, you're not in the right uniform? You know, you've got ghost patches, you've got Velcro patches, I get it, I understand everybody's working for different agencies, but look up the word uniform. What does it mean? You know, and I throw that to leadership, or lack thereof. Public relations, my last soapbox, public relations, you know what, we actually can advertise without having the real thing. You know what? How much fake is out there? You know, run a drill, run a fake patient. You know, do it from start to finish, you know, have it in a park, you know, the child fell off the street, Tim's a child who fell off the swing, here's your patient. You know, have your crew respond to it, and go through that job as a call. You can moulage him, you can do everything you need to do, and there's your public relations.
Okay, let me just try and kind of keep it going. Kelly, you're next.
I like what Teresa said before about not having labels and doing paid volunteer, but I never see anything mentioned about the fire rescue departments who are kind of in the middle. We're not paid and we're not the volunteer rescue squads. And that's a whole different can of worms with budgets and commissioners and how we're regulated, and it doesn't fit over here and it doesn't fit over there, and it's never mentioned.
Sure.
Which makes it hard, because so many fire departments, you know, you got $1 million, you know, their budget for fires over here, and the rescue squad's down here, but yet we do, you know, like in our town, our fire district is 3,000 people. Okay, in the town of Platica, there's 3 fire departments, ours is 3,000 people. We did 591 rescue calls last year for a town of 3,000 people, a district, and the fire did 100. But their budget is up here and ours is down here. And that's never addressed in any other paperwork. I never see that.
So to your point, we have an identity problem, right? If we were to summarize that. So that might very well be someplace we can go down the road. But I just want to keep it going. Go ahead, Karen.
In our county, in Ulster County, what's been happening there on one level is that the supervisors have gotten together and they're working with 911 to talk about EMS, but there's no EMS on that task force.
It's very frequent problem.
That's a real problem for me. I find that really, it's unbelievable that it didn't even come and ask. Okay, that's number one. I think that when I look at some of the squads in our area, I think some of the squads have really good training and really adequate EMTs, and other squads just throw their EMTs out there, they don't care who they get or what they do, and so it really puts a strain on everybody else, because you end up being called into a scene and you see things that are happening that are just, you don't even, your jaw drops.
Sure.
So I think there's a real training issue happening there, and it's, you know, it can be even like a squad that's next door to you or something, and you have to work at mutual aids, and it's not even good for EMS then in the whole county. Then I look at the paper and I say, yeah, it's great, and all these things that I recognize and that we've talked about in the past, and we've talked about at the summit, that we've organized around. And then I look at, you know, what are we talking about in regions? Because we're all so different in terms of rural versus urban, fire and EMS together. And so how do we, again, this is where we fracture so much. And we just, how do we even like look at that and go, this is such a dysfunctional freaking family.
So I can't even imagine, just to kind of elaborate on where Karen's at, and again, hats off, and I've told him 17,000 times, you know, the yeoman's job that Michael Beninati did of bringing that many personalities to the table and finding a way to get them to work together is just phenomenal. I mean, I am literally jealous of what he did, you know, to be able to get that group moving. And I don't think a lot of people thought he would be successful with it. And remember, Michael. Right? Well, again, in Michael's defense, where was this whole program or this whole thing born from? A Dutchess County awards meeting in a parking lot where they had Greenberg by the tie so he couldn't leave. You know, saying, you know, this is broken, and what are you gonna do to fix it? What's that?
We let him in the parking lot, that's where this whole conversation.
That's what I'm saying, it's, I mean, literally to hold him down, and then kudos to Ryan Greenberg to say, okay, you're loud, you're boisterous, do something about it. He rose to the challenge. And he assembled a dynamic, wide spectrum group of people who come from, just as you said, rural areas and careers and municipalities and volunteer and hybrid organizations, and said, what are we gonna do here, guys? We can sit around the table and say, woe is me, and this won't work, or we can say, hey, what can we do to make it work? What's it gonna take to make it work? And that's really what I was hoping that we could do here. So, Anthony, I'll give you a second in just a minute. What I'm kind of hoping to do is, what are the things in this 25 recommendations that we can do as a council to be able to start the ball here? And I don't know where it is, right? So I'm not, and I said this to Terry in an email the other day, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I will fully look you in the eye and tell you that. But I've gotten really good at surrounding myself by some really smart people, and that's you guys. Your organizations, your counties, either voluntold you to be here, and kudos for showing up, thank you, or they decided you were the best representative to be here at this table to be able to take this information back to them and get the fire stoked and get this thing so that we can make a difference together. And really, was kind of the goal. Andy, you were up next.
Thank you. So, in Dutchess, where my agency is, it's not as similar to Rockland, even though we're back, right? You know, the reason why we fight with each other with these overlapping CONs is because of home rule. There's no stability in that, and there's nothing we can do about it. So, at least not that I can see.
Respectfully, I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay.
We can look at the wall and say, I can't climb it, right?
Yeah.
I just can't get over that wall.
Yeah.
Or, as a group, we can figure out how we'll hold each other up until we get over the wall. And then we help the next person over, right? And raising 2 Marines, I watched them do a lot of amazing things as a group, not as individuals. And if there's any Marine Semper Fi in the room. But the point is, everything works because everybody's willing to work together. Individuals will fail every single time. And I don't mean individuals as in us, I'm talking about individuals as agencies. We just can't succeed by ourselves anymore. It's proven.
So,
We have to work together.
all right, so let me clarify. So individually, there's nothing I can do, right? Our agency can do, right? Because, I agree with you there. I mean, I also like this document a lot. It speaks, you know, it has something for everyone here, right, I think. And I recognize my own mortality that, you know, I'm not gonna be, you know, beacon back forever, right? So, I would embrace change. I want to go back to what Steve had said about data. You know, I do feel that it's important to have some sort of common denominator. And, you know, I have looked at my county's PSAT data, but we only have access to when agencies tagged on it, right? And it's very, very, I mean, not like, well, soily, but it's just not, it's not configurable.
It's not
Yeah, it's not configurable where I can throw it into a tool, right? So, and it just stops there. So like, I do want these conversations to happen, and I want them to happen often. But I also think that, you know, it's not just a common identity, it's a common language. You know, if it's data, you know, if it's whatever, because any politician will take something that's vague enough and turn it to their rhetoric as opposed to what it really is.
Sure.
And we have survived that many times.
But I think we can equally agree if there's a politician that wants to turn it into their rhetoric, as long as we're bettering our organizations from their rhetoric,
Yeah, I mean,
have we lost? Right? I mean, Terry said something before, and I'll get you a second, Terry, because I want to open it up to our guests too. They're all here listening passionately, and I'm sure they've got some comments they want to throw out. But I would challenge you guys sitting here. How many of you in the last 2 years, and I'll throw that wide out, have stopped in your local legislator's office or spoken to your local legislator at breakfast or in the grocery aisle and said, we need help? And here is our suggestions on help, right? So there's a couple. But imagine if every one of our agencies, every time they saw their representative, either in their district office or in the grocery store or, you know, putting fuel in their car at the gas station, said, hey, how are we making out on this EMS thing that we asked you about? They'll come up for re-election sooner or later, right? Why does fire service get what they want? Because for the most part, they speak as one voice. There's one of the goals that we should be thinking about, right? How do we speak as one voice so that politicians realize, hey, maybe I should listen here. Maybe I should figure out what we're going to do to fix this. So, the guests that are in the room, I don't want to ignore you. You don't have to comment, but you took the time out of your lives to come here tonight. Hopefully it wasn't just to listen to us banter back and forth. Do you guys have anything that you would like to add to the conversation here?
I know people were talking about funding and everything else, talking about insurance reimbursement, Medicare, Medicaid insurance. What we have to do, and we've talked about this in other places, so if you heard this before, I'm sorry. We need to take away, we're getting funding only from insurance. It's not just getting paid for the call. We need to sit here and address being prepared and being paid for the readiness of that ambulance and that crew 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If it does one call, it's covered. If it does 100 calls, it's covered. It's no longer relying on something that is totally unreliable to budget for a service. And why fire departments get what they want? Because they've been able to sit here and push to the state to where a fire district, and I can talk about it because I pay the highest taxes in all of Dutchess County for a fire department. The 5 guys meet, they decide this is what our budget's going to be. The first week in January, you can go in, or just the second Monday in December, you can go in and complain about it. They'll say thank you, you'll leave, they'll vote on it. In January, your new fire department budget goes into effect. So, and you can go and talk to your legislator about it, but it won't change because that's the way the law is written. Same thing in New York with the funding. Maybe that's the way we need to start looking at EMS. How can we sit here and go, it's gonna cost us X amount of dollars this year to run these ambulances, and it's gotta get ponied up from somebody, and unfortunately, it falls on the back of the taxpayer.
Sure.
But when you come down to the amount of money that some fire districts get for the lack of fires that they respond to, compared to the EMS calls in a district, where should the money go to?
Equal to that, right? Because each of you have run your organizations. You can't just say, here's $100,000, here's $1 million. They're gonna wanna see results.
I'm fine with that.
Are you, or are your agencies, or your organizations prepared to put changes in place that will produce results?
Yes.
Right? So we can sit right here all day long and say, okay, here's $1 million, everybody's gonna pay their EMTs $90,000 a year.
Where are you getting it from?
Thank you very much, because that was going to be the statement, right? Because there isn't an agency sitting in the room that has more than enough people. So maybe it starts with education, maybe it starts with educating the public why this is a good path. Guys, we can do this forever. Go ahead, Kristen.
One of the things that constantly comes to my mind when I think of this and what's negatively impacting us as an agency, and I know for my agency in Rhinebeck, is how can we reduce call volume? And I don't know if maybe I'm just living in this dream world that this is easy task, but what can we do to reduce call volume? And so in my district, we have multiple nursing homes that we're going to excessively for really dumb reasons. Why can't something be done to put different parameters on facilities, specifically speaking, that they have to handle more things in-house per se? So you get the nursing home patient who's 99 years old, who's had dementia for 92 of the years, and doesn't even know their own name, and they sit there and go, I just want to be dead. And now you're calling us for an EDP transport at 3 o'clock in the morning. These are the why.
So, and again, anybody correct me if I'm wrong here. Medicare did that.
So
Medicare did that. The problem that you run into, right, and I'm not speaking for any one facility, you didn't name any, so thank you very much, right? Are any of them overstaffed?
No, but this.
Okay, we joked about that,
No.
right? This is not, the staffing problem isn't unique to EMS, right?
But I don't think that the staffing problem, I don't think that this problem that I'm speaking of is something that is new in the last 3 years. This is a problem that's been going on in my 26 years, 27 years now of doing this, that they call for the dumbest reasons. Or you got the patient who's a pain in the ass and they just want to get rid of them for the night. And unfortunately, it is the reality. Or we have a facility who takes care of children of challenging behaviors. And so on Christmas Eve, the kid smashes the phone and then they want to call and send him out for an EDP. Well, why? Well, he just got done talking to his mom and he's not going to get the present he wanted. Well, what do you expect out of a 12-year-old who already has challenging behaviors?
So you're spot on. Maybe call screening, right, is a way to go. Maybe it's mental health change. Maybe it's cooperation with the other divisions of health, but I just want to get to somebody else. I mean, I know you're passionate about this, but I gotta get somebody else. Tim, I think you were first.
So you asked two different questions, and as Dave pointed out, Medicare and other health insurance programs have done something about stuff like that, but the EDP in the middle of the night is a different issue. That's the nights, weekends, and holiday staffing in SNFs. But to Dave's point, and I did some analysis on this, pre-COVID, nursing homes, SNFs were at 98% capacity, at least in Rockland County. I don't know about the rest of the region, but I imagine it's all pretty much the same. But because of all of the things we know that happened during COVID, now the SNFs in Rockland County are at about 70%. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Part of it is because some of those people died and families aren't putting their people back into SNFs. But the other part of it is that beds got decommissioned. And as a result of that, they don't have the staff, or vice versa. They don't have staff. So in the middle of the night, when somebody's acting out and they have a staffing ratio that dramatically increased, yeah, you bet they're gonna call 911 just to get that problem child out of their hair. So the healthcare system as a whole is broken. And EMS is, Dave, I think, mentioned earlier in the evening, EMS is at the edge of that cliff. And the whole healthcare system's right behind us, pushing.
Right, we're first.
And we are, we're on the brink of collapse in the whole
Right.
state, and that's one of the many reasons.
Right.
So I'm just gonna put my educator hat on for a second. So if anybody doesn't know, does anybody not know what a SNF is?
Yeah.
Skilled nursing facility. All right, sorry, can't throw the acronyms out. Several of us knew what that term meant. I just wanna make sure it was like, who's he talking about,
On
SNF?
Vital Science Academy, I believe they're up there. The state a few months ago did, I think it was 4 webinars dealing with skilled nursing facilities, adult homes and everything else, and the reason why EMS has to go in there, and they actually explain why it happens, because the in-house doctor who's never in-house gets a phone call at his house. He doesn't wanna go see the patient, and it's easier to sit here and refer them to a hospital.
Right, but there has to be some kind of overshadowing,
They go through everything.
like
including
quality
Help.
something.
Department of Health.
Yeah, that has to be able to say, okay, Dr. Jones, you can't do that anymore because,
They list all the reasons behind it, and then we run into the other problem where it would be a 7-digit call, where a commercial agency would get a 7-digit call, they're like, okay, they hang up, 911, we have no units, can you dispatch the local?
right.
All right, thanks, John. So again, I don't wanna spend the rest of the evening or the next couple of minutes talking about why we're broken. I kinda wanna move it to how we're going to work together to identify the broken. So, Nick, you were up first.
2 things. There's a lot of good comments here on the SNFs. The other thing I've noticed recently, or it's been going on for my 30 years, is that they wait. By the time they call you, it's so late. The person who may have had difficulty breathing just could have been dealt with a normal breather and didn't need to go to the hospital to get it resolved. Now needs a freaking bypass, CPAP, and like, you're bagging the person because they waited 2 days to get this person out. So that's another problem, because now you're taking up more resources and your wall time's gonna be a lot longer for that. Number 11 on the point, on the report, where you have to cover your calls, and I think that's a great metric. For some of the smaller agencies, like Karen said, and I know that in Rockland, if you spend, almost every time I'm out in a neighboring area, we get a call. There's no way we staffed. If that other agency staffed, then we wouldn't have been out. So you can't count that against the agency that went over here and now has a hole in their thing. Because even if you staff 3, it's gonna happen.
Your point is well taken.
There has to be
But for
some-
this to be effective, right, it can't just be for agencies A, B, and C.
Right.
It has to be A through Z.
It has to be A through
And that's
Z.
really where we all have to start to identify. If we could, I don't think anybody will argue, if you could cut down on the number of mutual aids, covering your own calls would be a whole lot easier.
But sometimes you can't. I mean, like,
I totally agree.
you do an average
It's
of
a
4 a
goal,
day.
right?
You
We-
do an average of 4 a day, all of a sudden you get 9 calls in an hour. Guess what? You ain't covered no matter what you did.
Totally agree. But that's why it's on an average, right?
Not average.
It's not based on a day, it's based on an average.
Yeah, but
So if you have that anomaly, as long as that anomaly isn't happening, 17 times a month, that percentage slides right over. You can have 2 or 3 bad days,
Right.
but as long as you're meeting 95% all the other time, when you do the aggregate, it all comes across and says, okay, we're well above that.
I
So
think it just needs to have a reason, like why you couldn't cover it should be a reason and not.
But again, I think one of the big things to keep in mind with this, and I want to keep everybody kind of focused for a second, we're going to go around the table in a second, but these are goals, right? These were goals that were put out. I don't think there was a single person, and Bill and Terry, correct me, that had the answers of how those are going to happen. Right? That is going to take a lot of cooperation and a lot of teamwork. So we have to kind of embrace the fact, I'll come around here, we'll have to embrace the fact that all of these things may not be achievable, but which ones are? Which ones can we meet, and how would we meet them? How would we work together to get there? So I think that's really where we need to go. Norman, what do you got? What do you want to add to this?
Well, I was gonna echo off her, what we did to get some recognition is we went and got a car from a wrecking place. Had the fire department cut it up, put a dummy in there.
Excellent.
LifeNet was fantastic on bringing their chopper over. We actually put the patient right in. We ended up getting 5 members for this open house. And it costed us pretty much, I don't know, probably 20 packs of hot dogs, because we gave a hot dog to the open house. But in that, but we all work together. And that's what our
Found
main
the
goal is
answer-
what we gotta be.
found the
is
answer to a problem.
It's not, we found the answer, and that's what we all gotta do here. I mean, we could talk all day how mental health is gonna bog us down, how this is gonna do. We gotta come up
Agreed.
with our positives, and that's.
Agreed, that's why I'm trying to steer this. Nick, anything that, and again, going back to the 25 things, you know, what in there?
No, everything else, people are covering it very well, so
Okay.
I don't wanna duplicate it, just 11 seems to be, you could get hung up.
Sure.
You could hang an agency if you don't have.
So if we,
it's not thought out well.
if we could come as a region and say that 24 of these are doable and one's not,
I think it's, no, I
boy,
think
that would be phenomenal.
Right.
I gotta be honest.
11's doable, I just think there's a little more.
What's in that
But-
framework?
What's that?
Yeah,
What's in that
yeah. What are you drinking?
Joan, what do you got? I wanna come right around, the table.
In our district, we have a facility that, I really think that's where Grange gets most of the calls. You get calls at this facility, it's not a nursing home or anything, but they no sooner come back, and then there's a call for the same room to go back out again. And where are they going? They're going into Poughkeepsie, get their drugs or whatever, and then come back. And then it's a drug overdose.
Right.
But it's, I mean, we get so many of them. You know, and when you speak about EMS to fire, I mean, like everybody basically has said in this room, fire gets way up here, EMS is down here and stuff. And I really think it has something to do with our commissioners, because they set the way that the agency is going to operate, even though, you know, they're budget-wise and stuff like that. But, I don't know, and with the career staff and volunteers, the more career staff we get, the less volunteers. And my chief complaint is you put a volunteer through an EMT class. I think they should have to sign a paper saying, okay, I will give you a year, I'll give you 18 months.
Sure.
But in no time flat, they're gone. We paid for them to go, and you don't see them anymore, because then they go with a paid agency. And I don't think that, I mean, do they think $18 an hour is super pay? You know, really? You know, it's
Terry's
a hard
offering
job.
20.
Well, that's what our agency, our
You know,
agency,
I'm
they
just
have to
throwing
sign a
out-
contract.
Yeah, I'm just throwing out a price, but that's what happens. I've seen so many of them in my 40 years that they're just gone
No?
and stuff. And then you get the kid who is very eager to start. You get him from high school, okay? You have him for a year, and then he goes off to college. Then he's gone, and then when he comes back, maybe one or two, maybe, they'll come back to you.
Sure.
Otherwise, you know, they're someplace else.
How dare you have a life?
I know.
Yeah,
How
right.
dare you? Bobby?
Well, I mean, all good points that we're making here tonight, but I think the thing about being able to collaborate and work together, I mean, the time I spent in Putnam County, I mean, you guys can vouch for that. Just getting that one piece to come together has been like a monumental thing, but, you know, we gotta do it, because you know what, if we don't, we're not gonna fix this.
Okay.
You know, we have to come together, sit at the same table, agree that we all have a problem, and agree to work together and to put egos aside. If we
Excellent.
don't do that, we're not getting anywhere.
All right, thank you. David, what do you got?
I agree. Right now, my department from Carmel Ambulance, we're starting to work with our neighboring departments to help them out. And we have a lot of drug rehabs and group homes in our area. That we have one drug rehab in our district that calls every time someone comes there. Before they take them inside, they have to be evaluated, so we call an ambulance and we go over there about 700 times a year. So really, our volunteers kind of got burnt out by doing that, and I have about 15, 20 volunteers left, and I'm paying people right now. So just need to work together. The same problems everyone else has.
Steve?
It's great to see everybody's having the same problems we're having. I don't feel so alone anymore.
Hi, Steve.
No, I think this is a great conversation. I've been part of this council for 20 plus years, and I think this is the first time I've seeing conversations surrounding the problems and issues that we've had. It's nice to see the state is recognizing this too, the governor's getting involved. But all the great conversations we had here tonight are awesome, but now what are we gonna do about it?
Oh, we're gonna get there.
Yeah, that's what I'm interested in. I'm willing to get my hands dirty to
Okay.
figure things out, so.
Excellent. Terry?
David, to circle back to where you were going, what can we do? Number 2, number 7, and number 8, I think those are 3 items that I think we as a group might be able to sink our teeth into a little bit in some form or another. We can't let this stop.
Agreed.
So many times we get this, a huge amount of work has been put into it, and we sit here and we're like, wow, this is really awesome, and it doesn't go anywhere else.
3 years have gone by.
Right, and I
Agreed.
think the last part of what I'm gonna say, and I'm probably gonna get knives thrown at me, is I think it's time EMS is recognized as a paid service. Police get paid, a lot of your fire services are getting finances dumped into them from every place, and maybe the firefighters aren't being paid, but the agency is getting paid to give the firefighters the things that they need. I think it's time that we start standing on the soapbox and say, we deserve this. The time that we put in it to certify, the time that we put in it to get that service out to people, there is a place for volunteerism. I am a diehard volunteer. I started that way, I'm gonna end that way. There's a place for volunteerism.
50 years
without
from
doubt.
now.
49 now. There's a place for it. But in some areas, I don't think the place for it is to be the prominent first response. I think if you got 4 trucks in the bay, staff 4 trucks.
All right.
And that's how you get it going. I'm off my box.
Tim, what do you got?
So just to put a little bit into perspective with regard to fire, because that's been thrown around quite a bit. You know, and I was a past mayor, so I have a little bit of insight into a village-run fire department. Their apparatus costs about 3 or 4 times as much as our ambulances, even the really nice ambulances like Terry's. But when they, now I'm talking about fire-based EMS, when they operate in support of EMS, their time on task is a hell of a lot less than the ambulance's time on task is. That ambulance still has to transport that patient, they have to, you know, turn over the patient, they have to come back, they have to restock, you know, an hour and a half later, they're still doing that job when the fire department is back in the truck bay and watching
Sound
football,
asleep.
whatever they're doing. But the other
Back
thing
in
is
bed.
with volunteer fire departments, which that makes most of our region, they have the same recruitment issues that we do.
Correct.
I know in Woodbury,
They're right behind us.
we looked at paid
They're right behind us.
drivers at one point because it was getting really bad. So yeah, they're right there too.
They're not immune. No, I agree. And just to kind of comment on that, I have the title of past fire chief, so I do know it. And so I've always had an opportunity to be able to see both sides. And the department that I was chief of, along with all the other agencies, it was about a 70-30 split. And that was giving fire 30% of the MVAs. If you took away their MVAs, it was more of an 80-20 split. But you've all said it before, it's shiny, it's fun. The equipment costs 100 times more than it does for an ambulance.
So the cost
You know,
of
so-
preparedness, as John was talking about,
Correct.
is a hell of a lot more.
But we'll move on. Go ahead, Kelly, you're up.
One of the things sometimes I think is educating the public on what medical emergencies are. I know there's the thing you talked about, and I know in our community, it's, especially with the elderly, they can't get to the doctors. You know, I say, you've been coughing for 4 days, have you called your doctor? Yeah, but I can't get in for 2 weeks. So guess what? The kids come over on a Sunday to visit grandma, she's sick, they don't wanna stay with her, and they don't wanna take her home, so let's call 911 and get her out of here. So I think it's educating the public on what an emergency is. Like,
Okay.
I love the hospital ER triages, because when I tell a patient that they're going to triage with this instance, they go, well, then I'll just have my friend take me. Okay, bye-bye.
Well, the
And
sad
so,
part with that
I
too
wish
is.
every hospital
Right.
had a triage, and I could say that on every, just about every call, not that I don't want to transport, but people are using it as a taxi.
Sure.
Because they think if they're on the stretcher, they can get in quicker, so I think it's education to the public on what emergencies are.
Well, in my area, PCPs aren't even seeing sick patients. You
Alright.
can't get an appointment.
All right, I'm trying to steer this home, I wanna get you guys home at a reasonable hour.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to stifle the conversation, I just wanna kind of wrap this up here in a little while. Alex, you're up.
I think everybody said everything. I like what Terry did, she just picked 4 points that we could really focus on, whether that's done.
I'm disappointed that she took away my thunder at the end of this, but
Yeah.
she's a smart lady, and I told you, that's why I kind of,
Whether it's
rub
done-
elbows with her just because I pick up on
Whether
it.
it's done with a tag or if it's done as the board as a whole, I mean, we focus on that together and
Okay.
bring up different points, but, certainly a good idea to.
All right, I like it. Annie?
So for number 2, I had 2 ideas. They did lower the age to 17, but we're not really teaching at the high school very much. A couple high schools do it. I have talked to my school district, and they're very interested in having an EMT course that's accredited for the diploma. It's just a matter of bringing in the resources that, for free for them to do it. They're willing to identify maybe perhaps a teacher of record so that it becomes.
Okay, I'll pick her.
Go ahead, Andy, sorry.
Sorry. You can't compete against them.
Terry?
I didn't know this. This meeting's gonna go on longer.
No, it's not, trust me, we're gonna attend this home. Anthony, did you get all your points out?
No, I just started.
Quick summaries, because I want to get to everybody at the table.
So exploring teaching the courses in the high schools and what's
Excellent.
required on that, and collaborating with the local squads when you do that, so that at least they get visibility, two perspectives of volunteers. And then, the whole thing about
This is not a
sponsorship
thingy.
versus teaching our own EMTs, the course sponsorship is a rigorous process, and if we're gonna increase the EMS by 10,000 people, we're gonna need some more, we're gonna need more core sponsors or something needs to break, right, before we get that.
Okay.
But it's very political, the core sponsor program. Also for number 8, I'm sure you guys are gonna hate me, but maybe have the firefighters lift assist and not the EMS.
Okay.
For number 10 and 13, standardize the demand analysis, which is kind of, how many crews do you need to staff in order to meet your demand in your area? And then have the PSAPs also conform with what the demand, be able to provide that data for the demand analysis. Including what's ALS need versus BLS need. Right?
Excellent.
And then change the laws for EMS to apply to the products.
Perfect, thank you. Karen?
I think Marltown, where I am, where I ride with, and as chief, we conquered a lot of this. And we were down the drain, we were hurting, we were like, how are we gonna get over the apron? And we realized that we needed to do something, and we did. We started an ambulance improvement district. One of the things that we did was we had a town meeting, and we got everybody to come to the town. We put out, thousands of signs that said, "Save Community Ambulance." They were all over Marbletown. We took out a billboard in Kingston, we wrote down 209, it said, "Save Community Ambulance." And it was not just because of Marbletown, but because of everybody. And so we really went public with the issue, and it brought a lot of attention. And then we went to the town, we managed to, after a lot of time, we brought in Mobile Life to support us, into the town meetings and into meetings that we had with the town. We got in touch with our legislatures, legislative people, we screamed about support for us. We just were relentless on it. We were relentless on the papers, we were relentless trying to get television time, and we did it. We have a contract now, we are covering and helping more people than ever now. Our call volume has gone way up, we are 24/7. We are competitive with everybody. We are making more money. We've gotten our line item back for our ambulance fund, which we would always put $30,000 a year back into it. We had to knock that off and throw it all into staffing at first. Now we're back, we have $130,000 back into our ambulance fund. We are like full steam ahead, and we're recognizing that what we have done is we have partnered with the town, which we didn't know whether it was gonna work out so well, But by contracting with the town and becoming an ambulance improvement district, we now get the tax from the people, more people now on our fund drive are supporting us. And more people, because we are running a really tight ship, it's clean, we expect people to be experienced. We put them through the paces of experience. You have to be at least an EMT for a year on and active working somewhere, and we check and we do our homework on it. And when you come in, you're not just allowed to just sit there and watch television. You have to help clean up, you have to make sure that rig check is in, everything is on iPads, and everything is, I mean, it's really tight. And you know what, it's working. And it's because we really took it home. We took it home and we didn't put it out there, and that's the beginning. Take it home and make it happen in your environment, because then you can get out there and say, we know that this can work. But we don't have that in our home. Other people come and we hire them and they're like, you should see what it looks like on our place, and you should see what that ambulance is doing, and you should see how it runs, and people don't even take care of it. Yeah, because nobody takes it home.
Leadership.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Good.
do it, folks. Take it home.
Good. Thank you, Karen. Steve?
I think the area that we're best poised to make an impact short term, considering most of these points are predicated on more funding or legislative action, things of that nature, is number 9 when it comes to implementing and establishing performance standards. We are perfectly positioned to have an impact there. We can't make mandates, we can't do enforcement, but we have a lot of really talented people with a lot of diverse experience and success, even like Marbletown, where we can put those out there, whether it's a simple checklist or leadership courses, best practices, everything from, you know, training, best practices for onboarding, to response metrics, to how to get the tax district, or offboarding, right? Shared purchasing, other ways that we can regionalize without taking away everyone's little fiefdom or kingdom. And I think this is a perfect time to start with that.
Good. David?
Well, besides number 5, obviously.
Okay.
I think that a lot of the commonality of everything that we have goes back to 2 things: PIO and education.
Don't use acronyms, big words.
And it really has, if you don't get the information out to the public, and you don't meet with your legislatures, and you don't meet with your town leaders, and bring those groups together, and there are multiple towns that we cover in a district or in our CON, and if you don't bring all those towns together and say, listen, this is what the readiness cost is versus what it costs per call, right? Because we're not getting the insurance. The other thing is alternate destinations, and if my boss has ever heard me say that, I'll deny it, but.
This is recording. Full disclosure. It's a public meeting.
Alternate destinations for the NHLs, you know, as well as engagement for education of the medical director, of your medical director of your agency, to have the conversation with the medical director of the SNF to educate his staff to say, you're not going to call them when they fall out of bed and they're uninjured and they can answer all 4 of their questions. They get lifted back up, they get an assessment, and they go back to bed. They do not have to go to the hospital. Or you call med control, and med control says they don't come to the hospital, right? So those are all things that we can do, but I think it really comes back to education and PIO.
Okay.
What does fire do really well? They have a leadership organization that educates them, that brings them up through the system, so you go from probie or boot to firefighter, to after you get some experience and get some classes, you can maybe become a second lieutenant, and then a lieutenant, and then a captain, and then, oh, you're really good at talking in front of people, so you're now gonna be the PIO, and you're gonna work for the chief. Or you're gonna be a training officer, training chief.
Yeah.
And then you have the chiefs, the administration side of it, and then you have the commissioners that oversee everything. In EMS, we don't have that structure in a lot of our organizations. We may have bits and pieces of it, but we just don't have that systematic organization of leadership. And leadership is where we have to be, and we have to educate our people.
Excellent.
I yield the rest of my time to Chris.
Thank you.
No, I just would echo off of Steve. Number 9 is a big one to me. I think I would like to see more guidance on number 9 and how we can collectively and have some continuity between each agency to be able to come up with those standards. I think that's important. The other thing, I think it was 13, I think that's another one, with the 911 systems, having again that continuity of how they're going to prioritize calls, and if, you know, commercial agencies aren't available and it's non-emergency, then let them wait rather than dispatching.
Roll it, turn.
Yeah, yeah, type thing. And I had one other. Oh, and then just echoing off of what Dave said about, you know, continuing that line of communication to ensure that we can somehow try to decrease some call volumes.
Excellent. Jeff, anything you want to shoot in?
Yes, I do. I've had 35 years in EMS. I had 20 years in fire, and I was a preceptor for 2 paid fire departments. What I have gleaned out of that experience is you put a crew of 2 in the front of an ambulance, you will not get in accordance of where you want to go to lunch. You go back to the firehouse, it's a community meal. And that is the biggest difference that I see between the 2 entities is fire has a sense of community, EMS has a sense of being an island. And if we can't get agreement in the front of an ambulance with 2 people, where is that voice going to go when it comes down to what we need it to be, a voice of unity? That's it.
Thank you, Jeff. Bill?
The document that you have and that you're reading, it's good that everybody's looking at the numbers and picking out which numbers they wanna work on. But I think we gotta look at the document as a whole. Even the part that says the state has to do this, I don't know, like even the first one, it says, you know, the state's gonna create that system. But we have to start thinking now, at our level, as what we can do to help that achieve its level. What we can do in each agency, in each one of these items, as an agency, as a provider, as a region, as a town, whatever it is, to make that happen. And if we can help them each one of these things and move it only a couple of percent one way or the other, it's really gonna help. Because if every organization that's involved in this does that, we're gonna be moving 10%. And then next time we'll look at it, we'll be moving 20%. So it's a whole package. There's no single solution. It's gotta be not everything that's here, but a good percentage of it has to get done in order to be successful. And I think that's what we all are looking for. And it's a team effort. This was a team effort, and the solution is gonna be a team effort.
Wow, that was, anybody in the back? I don't wanna shortchange you guys. Anything you wanna say? Wayne?
No, it just
Sure.
all comes down to leadership.
Okay.
Aggression.
Anybody else? John, I know you already got in. Anything you wanna add? Anybody else? And I don't know you by name, so I apologize for not knowing your names. But I met you all, but I don't remember your names. So here's what I'm gonna do. I am going to kind of put an email together, and I'm gonna send it out to the entire council. And I'm going to ask you guys that are sitting here to rally behind your colleagues that couldn't be here tonight, and get them motivated. What I'd like for you to do is pick out 5 things in this report that we can start working on as a group to implement before the state even adopts it? Because even if this doesn't make it to the governor's budget, let's say it gets wiped, is there anything in here that we can't do on our own? That we can't figure how we're going to address it? Whether it's this issue or this issue. Terry gave you 4 or 5 of her, and Anthony had his that were there, and you know, everybody's got their particulars. So what I'm going to ask you to do, and I'll put the email out, that you send that back to Karen, because she left. Then what Jeffrey's going to do is he's going to kind of data crunch that and come up with the top 5 things that everybody agreed we could do. When we come back in May, we're going to form a tags to address each one of those 5 things. So that group will work on, here was the top 5, so we'll create a tag that works on item number 1 or 8 or 15 or whatever that number happens to be, so that we can start to have a discussion.
So David, just to be clear, so you want us to give you the 5 out of the 25
Do you think that we
that
can
are most, that we can most
that you
now.
think that we can start working on right now, not wait for the state to implement this
And
stuff?
how we can do that, or our
No,
ideas?
I want to know what the top 5 things you
Okay.
think that we can do now are,
Okay,
right?
okay.
We'll receive it, we'll correlate it, we'll push it back out to you. Then in the May meeting, what we're going to do is say, okay, these were the top 5 things. Now let's figure out who wants to sit on this tag and how can we start to address this. And then when we come back in September, that tag will say, here are, and this is essentially, Bill and Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, is exactly how this committee came up with this report. Figure out what we want to do, put a bunch of smart people in a group to start working on solutions, bring those back to the entire council so that we can start and push things out. And as Alex said, and Anthony said, and Bob said, and Dave said, and everybody said, we all have things that we can address. Can we address them together as a group, right? So that's where I'd like to go with this.
What's the date of the May meeting?
Go ahead, Anthony.
So, I mean, I make an offer to make Jeff's job easier and Karen's job easier. I mean, we could just do a ranked choices in Google Forms and just have Google calculate it for us.
Who's gonna change the topics?
Well, that's the thing, we got to decide on the, you know, what is it? We're gonna put all 25 things as a ranking choice, and then everybody kind of ranks them or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Makes Jeff's life easier.
Anybody, who wants to make Jeff's life easier?
I was gonna alter the topics, leave the number, but change the wording on it and see if he catches it.
No, I mean,
He
it's
would.
not that, I mean, I could volunteer to do that.
Okay, so what I'm gonna ask you to do is work with Karen and Jeff,
Okay.
right? To get that developed. Do you think we can get that done in the next 7 to 10 business days?
Yeah.
Because I'd like to get the email out in enough time while we're still hot on
It's
this.
just trying to summarize 23 pages into like 25.
Send the
I
document
think
with
you
it.
do, number 1, the topic of it, and just, if they wanna click on it, it goes to the full PDF and you can read it all you want. Don't shove don't shove the full
Yeah,
paragraph
I
in
don't-
the.
that's
We're looking for people to come up with the top 5 that we can start now,
Yeah.
and we don't have to wait for the state. How do we as a region move forward with these suggestions?
Yeah, all right. I mean, Monday's a holiday, so here you go.
Okay, so within the next 7 to 10 business days, you'll hook up with Jeff, you'll get that out. Once that's ready, I'll get the email out to everybody else. You guys will see it, please talk to the rest of your colleagues, you know, on the councils. If you want to, I don't know when your local counties are meeting, but if, before you answer that, you wanna go back and talk to them, which I would highly suggest, get their input. Let them know what we're trying to do as a region, so that we can help them, because it's not anything other than everybody working together to reach a common goal. Does that make sense? Anything that we should do different?
Send this white paper to your town supervisors and your county legislators.
Absolutely. Please share it with them.
In your hospital administration.
And if you have the time and you have the contact with them, don't send it to them, deliver it to them. And then have a little conversation of, I'd like for you to read something, even if you're getting their assistant, who's going to have their ear, you know, get in somebody's ear, let them know that you're passionate about it. 2 or 3 of you show up, I don't know, bring donuts.
So David, can we have some time then and getting this information back to you?
Yeah, I'll put it in there. What I'd like to do is, I'd like to have it, the ability, and we'll put that when the email comes
Yeah,
out,
okay.
of the deadline of when we would like it back. Because what I'd like to do is have all the numbers crunched and back to you guys with what the results were before the May meeting.
And when's the May meeting was what?
17.
17.
So, right, so my goal is that you know exactly what the top 5 are, so that when we come back in here for the council meeting on that date, you already know what the
You may actually.
data came out with.
You may be able to actually see it as you vote. You may be able to see what the top 5 are after.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if Google does that or.
As long as it doesn't.
Google does that.
All right,
Yeah.
those are all logistics,
You're right.
but that's kind of where I'd like to be. I'd like to be by May,
Yeah.
we're putting tags together to try and start to work on this stuff. Is everybody good with that?
Adjourn.
And if you'd like, in May, nominate somebody else to be president, you don't have to do any of this homework.
Oh, I'll make
Okay? Motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Oh.
Have a great evening, guys.